Okay, guys, so I've delayed reviewing this because, in part, I didn't want to. And then when I figured it was inevitable and impossible to ignore that this album is going to be talked about probably for a while longer, if anything is to come of the awards coming up, I need to throw in my 2 cents in here because I am probably in the complete opposite direction of what anyone else is saying out there, at least anyone who has a really gargantuan megaphone out there. So bear with me for a moment. Let's talk about this album. Welcome back to Y.E.S, everyone. Today we are talking about Montero, the first full-length studio album released by Lil Nas X. So yeah, the first full studio album. 7 was his EP released a few years ago that got a lot of hype because of Old Town Road and a couple other songs out there. And I didn't like that album. I thought there were a few songs in there that had some potential, and to be honest, when I was listening to this album and trying to give it as much of a fair shot as I could still recognize, okay, Lil Nas X may not make a lot of songs that maybe I like, but there are some music juices in there that he's trying to put in a genuine squeeze so that they can come out so other people can believe that he's trying to give a genuine effort. But alas, I disagree with almost everything that is placed in here. Now, I'm trying to make sure that I try and give a review that doesn't sound very preachy or holier than thou, because this is about music. That's the main focus that I'm trying to talk about. However, something so far from what music validates as quality is kind of what this album is. It is one of the weirdest and most offensively opposite anti-value albums I've listened to out there. Now, I know from some of the songs in here that Lil Nas X is kind of almost in a rebellious state in a way. He's trying to almost in a way prove who he actually is by trying to be the opposite of what the world, or at least a world with some dignity, is telling him what he should be. His lyrics talk about him indulging in things revolving around sex or drugs, or trying to focus the world all around him rather than trying to be a good example for other people, and just trying to get the money that he never had when he was younger, and how he had talked about suicide so often, and how he had a pretty crappy relationship with his mom. A lot of things go into this that, yeah, it is sad, but those things don't validate the terrible wickedness that goes into this. And yes, that sounds kind of old school. I get that. Some of you are probably tuned out. That's not the point. I'm going to get my point across here, and you can't delete this video because of it. He's trying so hard to want to be real, and I get that. That's something that hip-hop artists always try to talk about. They talk about how they're the real thing. They talk about how far of a distance they'll go in order to prove how legit they are about what particular skill they are, or how highly ranked they're going to be in the legends later on. He talks a little bit about those things here. And as I mentioned, he has some moments where he cares about making sure the production has some quality value in there. Not the whole thing, as you will find out in the end. But I do think there is a part of him that is trying to make sure that not the whole album can just be charged with being basic or with being completely in this post-quality music stage that we have right now. And I don't mean that entirely, I'm just talking about mainstream stuff. I actually feel really sorry for the guy. There's been a lot of noise that Lil Nas X has had throughout the entirety of 2021 where I get actually kind of angry, but again, we're only talking about the album. So when I listen to some of the stuff that's in this album, I just think, this poor soul. He's endured some things that are just not right, but he always takes the wrong lesson from it, and that is what he is, in a way, teaching to his audience members. Now, what I'm about to say is kind of weird, and I hope that you can try and understand what I mean by this. Lil Nas X is a con artist. I don't mean that in the sense that he's a fake artist. What I mean is he did one thing and now he's persuading you to believe he's another thing. And he's trying so hard to try and get everyone to accept and adore and love him for this new, different direction he's going in. And I just can't extend an olive branch to this situation that we have here. It's supremely dishonest. And as I mentioned before, all the wrong lessons are taken in here because it is rooted in anti-values. You cannot point to one song in here where a true good to honest virtue can be cited in here. A lot of things that might talk about the harsh truths of life, I get that, but no virtues. And Lil Nas X prides himself in that. And that's the high top tipping point that makes this album go downhill for the complete opposite of quality that it proclaims to try and be. It is trying to force you to believe that it is quality when it is the farthest thing from it. As I hinted before, there are moments where I feel like he is trying to care about the production. I don't necessarily believe that his voice itself is terrible, but the songwriting, can't give him an inch there, at least in this album. The few elements that I thought were somewhat interesting was a few moments where he tried to incorporate jazz horns, and I don't mind the fact that Elton John was featured. I guess he was playing the piano in one of the songs here. And Miley Cyrus, interestingly enough, from the history of Billy Ray Cyrus having been on the previous project, makes an appearance, and her vocals are welcome, but lyrically, once again, it doesn't really benefit anything musically quality oriented. There's so much that I wish I could say, and that's why I've tried to record this several times before. And you know, if more of a conversation presents itself, I may just do a discussion video about why all the attention that this album is getting is rooted in the false idea of what we are supposed to think of as quality, independent of how many awards he ends up winning at the Grammys or anything else coming up in the future. There's going to be a moment to present itself where I will need to talk about that, or at least will have the urge to. Something in my mind and in my heart will say, you need to take some time to talk about this. But for now, I think I've made my point necessarily. Again, I listened to it with full intention of wanting to understand it. And while I found slivers of things that made me believe, okay, he understands that music is in fact an art form, but he sacrifices so much of it in order to get this false sense of glorified attention for all the wrong reasons. This is an unfortunately bellowing example of what is the antithesis to good music and to good societies. So, after having listened and reviewed this album with the following grades in the following categories here, how would I recommend this album? I am going to give it enough attention comes to this for some reason, and that discussion is needed to be had a little bit more, I will go much, much deeper into it because I know I can provide the notes for it. I just really needed to get this out because the end of the year is among us, and I decided, all right, well, it's time to wrap this one up and speak my piece and just let the world know, no, not everyone agrees, and not everybody who would in fact agree with me would post a video like this on the internet. This album now creates an even bigger reason for me to want to search for even better quality music out there, and for this channel to truly highlight, hey, remember when classic and timelessness existed? It's out there still, but it's not getting the time of day because trash like this that gets labeled as art inappropriately needs to be called out, and I think I'm one of the few people who is willing to do that. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you want more Yes in your life, be sure to subscribe to this channel so you can discover, promote, and review the best in entertainment that'll make you say yes. I probably will have that second video talking about this album at some point, probably sooner than later. Don't know how it's going to go down, but I know that there's a lot to say, and a lot of people are going to make arguments, that will fail. They think they're right, but they're not. And this album, it's not right. Something has to be done. This is not the answer.